One type of attentional deficit has helped tie specific brain areas to spatial attention in humans. Damage, typically to the parietal or prefrontal cortex as the result of localized oxygen deprivation during a stroke, has been observed to cause something known as hemispatial neglect, in which patients seem to ignore half of the world. To quote a clinician, "When neglect is severe, the patient may behave almost as if one half of the universe had abruptly ceased to exist in any meaningful form. One patient may shave, groom, and dress only the right side of the body. Another may fail to eat food placed on the left side of the tray. Another may omit to read the left half of each sentence, or even the left side of every word." These attentional deficits are found for the side of space opposite the neural damage. This is consistent with a general contralateral organization of both stimulus representations and motor control in the brain. Recall how visual stimuli from the left half of a visual scene are represented in the right hemisphere of the brain. Sensations of touch on the left half of the body are processed in right somatosensory cortex, and the right hemisphere of motor cortex controls movements in the left half of the body. In humans, there's an asymmetry in attentional processing, such that the most severe cases of neglect all involve damage to the right hemisphere and neglect of the left hemifield. Importantly, neglect patients are not blind or even impaired in their visual perception in that half of the visual field. When single targets are presented in this area in isolation, they're perceived normally. Rather, it's moving attention to that part of the scene in the presence of other stimuli that poses a problem. So in a real complex environment, attention is drawn to and then will remain on features and objects in the other non-neglected half of visual space. Here are some examples of copied and spontaneous drawings by neglect patients. You can see how the left half of most of these drawings is missing. Sometimes all the features that should be, in the example of the clock, taking up 360 degrees are instead squashed into one half of the image. This bias is evident not just in the processing of currently present sensory information, but can even be seen in remembered scenes. For example, patients asked to describe the surroundings looking toward or away from a local landmark provided greater detail for whichever half of the remembered scene was on the right-hand side of their imaginary vantage point. Even eye movements during REM sleep show a rightward bias. Nor are these effects necessarily restricted to visual processing. Blindfolded neglect patients performing a tactile search of objects on a table are impaired for objects to their left, regardless of which hand is used to perform the search. Acute neglect following right hemisphere damage is fairly common, although fortunately most patients recover spontaneously. Neglect is probably the clearest clinical example we have of a pure spatial attention deficit.